Hello, I'm Julian Northbrook from doingenglish.com, and this is another video in the language science series. Today we are talking about activation. Teal Falls says, I'm Dutch, but most of the time I think in English. This is probably because I spend a lot of my time online. It's making my English pretty good, but it seems to make my Dutch worse. I often catch myself almost saying words in English and not being able to recall the Dutch equivalent when talking to people here. The fact I'm not a very sociable person probably doesn't help either. This is a great comment, and thank you to Teal Falls for that. This is a pretty common phenomenon. Most people, when they are learning English as a second language, will experience this the other way. They will find that their native language gets in the way of their English. But as your proficiency increases in English, you will find your English starts to affect your native language. It all comes down to something called activation. Now, this is quite complicated and a little bit difficult to explain, although I talk about it in immense detail in my Kindle book, Think English, Speak English, How to Stop Performing Mental Gymnastics When You Speak English. Link in the description. Basically, when you know more than one language, in your brain, those languages are always awake. You can't ever switch off a language. It's not like a light switch where you can say, today I'm going to speak Japanese, switch on. Today I'm going to speak English, switch on. Didn't click at all, never mind. What this means is if, for example, I see a pair of glasses, in my brain the word glasses will become active. But because I know Japanese, the word megane will also become active. The brain has to actually choose between the two equivalents. Do I want to say glasses or do I want to say megane? It depends, of course, on whether I'm speaking English or Japanese. When we've got these two activated nodes, these two things in our brain, glasses, megane, the brain has to choose which one is correct, which one do we want to say right now. Now, clearly it would be a huge Monday if we started to use random kotoba when we're hanashiteru, because people wouldn't likai what we're saying. So what happens is in the brain, the two versions of the word that I want to use fight it out, and the winner is the one which gets used. 99% of the time, it's gonna be the correct one. But we've all had the experience of saying something in one language and then mistakenly using a word from our native language or from another language whilst we're speaking. The challenge here for the brain is that this uses up a lot of energy. If every single word we want to use has to be picked in this way where they're constantly fighting between each other and, we're going to get really tired really quickly. And if you are switching between languages all the time, yes, you will get really tired really quickly. So what the brain has is a suppression mechanism. And this is what we call activation. Say I am using English all day long. English will become very active in my brain in comparison to Japanese, which will become much weaker. It'll almost go to sleep. It won't switch off completely, but it will become suppressed. It will become inactive. This will make it much easier to select the English words and the English chunks and phrases that I want to use when I'm speaking. If, on the other hand, I've spent all day in Japanese, I've been listening to Japanese, I've been speaking Japanese, everything around me is in Japanese, the opposite will happen. Japanese will become very active in my brain, and English, even though it's my first language, will kind of become inactive. It'll go to sleep. Not as much as my Japanese would, because English is my first language and it always tends to be stronger, but the more proficient you are in your second language, the more it can suppress your first language. The important thing for you to understand about this, about activation, is that it is like something that gets pumped up. Through exposure to English, activation builds up and up and up and up. And then when you are not exposed to the language anymore, when you are not using the language anymore, it slowly drains away. This means that it's not only how much you use English, how much you are exposed to English that is important, but how often, how frequently, and how recently you have been using English. The more you use English, the higher the level of activation is going to be. And this is why we can get situations just like this one described by our friend Teal Falls, where you can be using a second language so much, exposed to the second language so much, that your level of activation in that language becomes very, very, very high relative to your first language, and suddenly you feel that your second language is affecting your first, that somehow you are forgetting words because the second language is getting in the way. And of course, this has important implications for speaking English as a second language. If you are finding that you are always stuck thinking in your first language and translating into your second language, part of that might be a bad translation habit, as I've talked about in previous videos. Check links in the description. But part of it also might be the overall level of activation that English has in your brain. For more detail on that and exercises and ways to overcome that, check out my Kindle book, Think English, Speak English, How to Stop Performing Mental Gymnastics Every Time You Speak English. Link in the description. That then is it from me today. I hope you've enjoyed this video, but before I go, have you experienced this phenomenon yourself? Have you found yourself forgetting your native language? Have you found yourself unable to recall words that you should know? Tell us all about it in the comments. Thank you and goodbye.